She was homeless, broken, and had nothing left to lose, until she found a terrified little girl hiding behind a dumpster in the freezing dawn. What Sera didn't know was that this child belonged to the most dangerous man in the city, a Mafia boss whose enemies would kill for the chance to hurt what he loved most. When she returned his daughter and asked for nothing but a job, Matteo Vitale saw something in her eyes that stopped his cold heart dead, but loving her would put a target on all their backs. Because in his world, showing weakness meant death, and she had just become his greatest vulnerability. The woman who saved his daughter was about to ignite a war that would force him to choose between his empire and his soul. But when the bullets start flying and blood stains the marble floors, will love be enough to save them all? Or will it destroy everything they've built? Subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because this story of redemption is about to get darker than you can imagine. The cardboard beneath Sera felt like ice against her back. She pulled the thin blanket tighter around Tommy's small body as another coughing fit shook him. His breathing came in short, painful gasps that made her chest ache. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, stroking his hair. "Just try to breathe slow." Tommy's eyes looked too big in his pale face. At 9 years old, he should have been running around, playing with friends. Instead, he spent most days fighting for each breath. The asthma medicine cost more than Sera made in a week of odd jobs. She reached into her jacket pocket and counted the crumpled bills. $12. Not enough for the medicine, but it would have to be. "I'll be right back," she told Tommy, kissing his forehead. "Stay here and rest." The pharmacy was 6 blocks away. Sera walked fast, her worn sneakers slapping against the wet pavement. Early morning fog rolled through the empty streets. Most people were still asleep in their warm beds. At the pharmacy, Sera handed over her $12 and asked for Tommy's inhaler. The pharmacist shook his head. "This costs $38, he said. "You need 26 more. Sera's heart sank. "Please, my brother can't breathe without it." The man's face softened, but he shook his head again. "I'm sorry. I wish I could help." Sera walked back slowly, dreading what she'd tell Tommy. As she turned the corner near their squat, she heard a small sound. A whimper, like a hurt animal. Behind a rusty dumpster, a little girl sat curled in a ball. She wore a dirty pink dress and had long, tangled, dark hair. Her feet were bare and covered in mud. "Hey there," Sera said softly, crouching down. "Are you hurt?" The girl looked up with wide, frightened eyes. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Sera's heart broke looking at her. "Where's your family, honey?" The little girl just stared. She didn't speak or make a sound. Sera looked around the empty alley. No one else was there. She couldn't leave a child alone on the streets. Not when the sun was barely up and danger lurked everywhere. "Come on," Sera said gently. "Let's get you somewhere warm." The girl didn't resist when Sera lifted her up. She was light as a feather, all skin and bones. Sera carried her back to the abandoned building where she and Tommy lived. Tommy was awake when they arrived, wheezing quietly. His eyes widened when he saw the little girl. "Who's that?" he asked. "I found her outside," Sera said. "She's scared and alone." Sera set the girl down on an old milk crate. She opened a can of soup and heated it over their small camping stove. The girl watched every move with those big, dark eyes. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Sera asked. The girl said nothing. "She doesn't talk," Tommy observed. "Maybe she can't." Sera handed the girl a cup of warm soup. She took it with both hands and drank slowly. Some color came back to her pale cheeks. "We'll figure this out," Sera said, more to herself than to anyone else. The girl stayed close to Sera all day. When Sera moved, The girl followed. When Sera sat down, the girl sat beside her. By evening, she had fallen asleep against Sera's shoulder. Tommy's breathing was getting worse. Sera knew she had to do something. The next morning, she walked to different shops and asked if anyone had work. Nobody needed help from a homeless woman with dirty clothes and no address. On her way back, Sera saw the flyers. They were posted on every streetlight and storefront. A little girl's face stared back at her. The same face that had been sleeping next to her all night. Missing. Elena Vitale, age 7, the flyer read. Reward, $10,000. Contact immediately. Sera's hands shook as she read the address. The Vitale mansion was on the rich side of town, where she'd never been. She looked down at the girl walking beside her. Elena. Her name was Elena. $10,000 would change everything. Tommy could get his medicine. They could find a real place to live. But something about the flyers made Sera nervous. The girl, Elena, seemed terrified of everything. What if going back to her family wasn't safe? That night, Sera watched Elena sleep. The little girl had nightmares, crying out and thrashing around. Sera held her close until she calmed down. "What happened to you, baby?" Sera whispered. In the morning, Sera made her decision. She couldn't keep Elena on the streets. No matter how scared the little girl was, she needed to go home to her family. They probably loved her and were worried sick. "We're going to take you home," Sera told Elena. "Your daddy is looking for you." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Sera dressed Elena in the cleanest clothes she could find. She combed the tangles from her hair and washed her face. Tommy came with them, holding Elena's hand as they walked toward the nice part of town. The Vitale house wasn't like anything Sera had ever seen. It looked like a castle, with tall iron gates and perfectly trimmed gardens. Men in dark suits stood by the entrance, watching everyone who passed by. Sera's heart pounded as she approached the gate. One of the guards stepped forward. "What do you want?" he asked, his hand resting on something inside his jacket. "I found her," Sera said, gently pushing Elena forward. "I found Elena." The guard's eyes went wide. He spoke quickly into a radio, using words Sera didn't understand. Within seconds, more men appeared. They surrounded Sera, Tommy, and Elena. "Don't move," one of them ordered. Sera pulled Tommy close, fear racing through her body. These men looked dangerous. Elena began to cry, reaching for Sera with both arms. "It's okay," Sera told her, even though nothing felt okay. The front door of the mansion flew open. A man stepped out, and the whole world seemed to hold its breath. He was tall and lean, with dark hair and cold eyes that seemed to see everything. His expensive suit was perfect, not a wrinkle anywhere. This had to be Elena's father. The way the other men stepped aside showed just how powerful he was. He walked toward them with long, confident steps. When he saw Elena, his face changed. For just a moment, relief and pain crossed his features. Then the cold mask returned. "Elena," he said softly. Elena looked between her father and Sera. Then she ran to Sera, wrapping her small arms around Sera's legs. The man's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being ignored, especially by his own daughter. "Bring her inside," he ordered. "All of them." The guards separated Sera from Elena and Tommy. Sera fought against their hands. "Don't hurt them," she shouted. "I brought her back safely." The man held up one hand, and everyone stopped moving. "You found my daughter?" he said to Sera. His voice was like ice. "Where?" "Behind a dumpster downtown," Sera answered honestly. "She was scared and alone." "How long have you had her?" 2 days. I took care of her, fed her, made sure she was safe." He studied Sera's face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Then he looked at Tommy, who was coughing again. "You're homeless," he stated. Sera lifted her chin. That doesn't make me a bad person. Something flickered in the man's eyes. No, it doesn't. He walked to Elena, who was still clinging to Sera. When he reached out to touch her, Elena flinched away. Pain flashed across the man's face so quickly Sera almost missed it. He pulled his hand back. "Come inside," he said. "We need to talk." The inside of the house was even more amazing than the outside. Everything gleamed like it had never been touched. Sera felt dirty just walking on the polished floors. They sat in a room with furniture that probably cost more than Sera had ever seen. Elena refused to leave Sera's side, climbing into her lap and hiding her face. "My name is Matteo Vitale," the man said. "Elena is my daughter." "I'm Sera," she replied. "This is my brother Tommy." Matteo pulled out a thick roll of money. "This is your reward. $10,000 as promised." Sera stared at the money. It was more than she'd ever dreamed of having, but something about the way he offered it bothered her. "I don't want your money," she said. Matteo's eyebrows shot up. "Everyone wants money." "I want a job," Sera said. "Something honest, where I can take care of my brother." "A job," Matteo repeated, like the words didn't make sense. "I'm a hard worker. I can clean, cook, watch kids. I'll do anything legal." Matteo studied her again. Elena had fallen asleep in Sera's arms, something she'd never done with anyone else since coming home. "You can wait here while Elena settles in," Matteo finally said. "Then we'll discuss your employment." Sera nodded, relief flooding through her. Maybe things were finally looking up. That's when the first gunshot rang out. The sound made everyone freeze. Elena jerked awake with a scream. Tommy grabbed Sera's arm, his face white with terror. Matteo was already moving, shouting orders in a language Sera didn't recognize. More gunshots echoed from outside. "Get down!" Matteo yelled at Sera. Sera dove behind the heavy couch, pulling Elena and Tommy with her. Elena was crying now, the same terrified sound she'd made in her nightmares. "Shh, baby," Sera whispered, covering Elena's head with her hands. "I've got you." The shooting seemed to last forever. Sera could hear men shouting, glass breaking, and car engines roaring. Elena trembled against her chest. When silence finally returned, Matteo appeared beside the couch. His perfect suit was dirty now, and there was a cut on his cheek. "Is everyone hurt?" he asked. Sera checked Elena and Tommy quickly. "We're okay." Matteo's eyes met hers. In them, she saw something she recognized, the fear of losing someone you love. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "It's not safe for any of you to leave tonight." Elena whispered something so softly, Sera almost missed it. "Sera," the little girl said. "Don't leave me, Sera." It was the first word Elena had spoken since Sera found her. The sound of her small voice broke something open in Sera's chest. Matteo heard it too. He stared at his daughter with wonder and pain mixed together. "She hasn't spoken since," he began, then stopped. "Since what?" Sera asked gently. Matteo's face went hard again. "Since her mother died." The weight of those words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Sera understood now why Elena was so scared, why she had nightmares, why she'd rather cling to a stranger than go to her own father. "We'll stay tonight," Sera said, "just until it's safe." But as she looked around the enormous house with its armed guards and bulletproof windows, Sera wondered if anywhere would ever really be safe for Elena Vitale, or for any of them. Matteo showed them to a guest room that was bigger than any place Sera had ever lived. Elena refused to let go of Sera's hand, even when Matteo tried to take her to her own room down the hall. "She can stay with us," Sera said, "just for tonight." Matteo nodded stiffly and left them alone. As Sera tucked Elena into the soft bed, the little girl looked up at her with those big, dark eyes. "Will you protect me?" Elena whispered. "Always," Sera promised, meaning every word. Tommy was already asleep on the couch, breathing easier in the warm, clean air. Elena curled up next to Sera, finally peaceful. But Sera lay awake long into the night, listening for sounds of danger and wondering what she'd gotten them all into. Outside their door, she could hear Matteo's voice giving cold, sharp orders. Whatever world Elena lived in, it was dangerous. And now Sera and Tommy were part of it too. When morning came, nothing would ever be the same. Sera woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she felt Elena's small body curled against her side and remembered everything. Sunlight streamed through windows bigger than the walls of their old squat. Tommy was sitting up on the couch, looking around the fancy room with wonder. "Sera," he whispered, "is this real?" Before she could answer, someone knocked on the door. Sera pulled Elena closer and told them to come in. A woman in a crisp uniform entered carrying a breakfast tray. She set it down and smiled at Elena. "Good morning, Miss Elena," she said warmly. "Your father is waiting for you in the dining room." Elena shook her head and pressed her face into Sera's shoulder. "She'll eat here," Sera said. "Thank you." The woman nodded and left. Sera helped Elena and Tommy wash their faces in the marble bathroom. Everything was so clean and perfect, Sera was afraid to touch anything. They were eating when Matteo appeared in the doorway. He wore another expensive suit, dark blue this time, and his hair was perfectly styled. He looked like he'd never been in a gunfight in his life. "Elena," he said, "come have breakfast with me." Elena shook her head and moved closer to Sera. Matteo's jaw tightened. "She's my daughter." "She's scared," Sera said quietly. "Give her time." "I've given her 6 months," Matteo said, his voice getting colder. "Ever since her mother died, she won't speak to me. Won't let me near her. You've known her 2 days, and she talks to you." The pain in his words made Sera's heart ache. She could see how much he loved Elena, even if he didn't know how to show it. "Maybe she just needs to feel safe," Sera suggested. "She is safe. This house has more security than the president's." "That's not the same thing." Matteo stared at her for a long moment. Then he sat down in one of the fancy chairs, looking out of place in his own house. "Tell me about yourself," he said. "There's not much to tell." "Everyone has a story." Sera looked down at Elena, who was eating eggs and watching the conversation with worried eyes. "My parents died in a car crash 3 years ago," Sera said. "I was 25. Tommy was 6. I've been taking care of him ever since. No other family. Just us. Jobs? Whatever I could find. Cleaning offices at night, washing dishes. Nothing lasted long when you don't have an address or clean clothes." Matteo studied Tommy, who was trying not to cough. "He's sick. Asthma. He needs medicine I can't afford." "Why didn't you call child services? Let them put him in a foster home where he'd get medical care?" Sera's eyes flashed with anger. "Because he's my family. You don't give up on family." Something changed in Matteo's expression. "No, you don't." He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, men in suits patrolled the grounds like soldiers. "Last night's attack was from a rival family," he said. "They want to hurt me by taking Elena. As long as you're here, you're a target too." "Then we'll leave," Sera said, even though the thought scared her. "No." Elena's voice was small but firm. She looked at Sera with panic in her eyes. "Don't leave." Matteo turned around slowly. His daughter had spoken to him, even if it was just one word. "She can't lose anyone else," he said quietly. "And I can't lose her." Sera felt the weight of their situation. Elena needed her, but staying here meant danger. Tommy needed medicine and safety. And Matteo needed to learn how to be a father again. "What are you offering?" Sera asked. "A job, taking care of Elena, room and board for you and your brother, medical care, security." "What's the catch?" "You can't leave the grounds without guards. You can't contact the outside world without permission. And if you betray my trust—" He didn't finish the sentence. Sera looked at Elena, who was holding her breath, waiting for an answer. Then she looked at Tommy, who needed so much more than she could give him alone. "Okay," she said, "but I have conditions too." Matteo raised an eyebrow. "You're in no position to make demands." "Elena needs normal things, playing outside, drawing pictures, maybe eventually going to school. She can't live like a prisoner." "She'll live like my daughter." "Those should be the same thing." Matteo was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "Anything else?" "Tommy starts school as soon as he's healthy, and I want to know what we're really dealing with. If there's danger, I need to understand it." "No." "Then no deal." They stared at each other across the elegant room. Elena watched them both, her small hand reaching for Sera's. Finally, Matteo sighed. "My assistant will bring you a contract to sign. Welcome to the Vitale household." After he left, Sera wondered if she'd just made the best decision of her life or the worst. The rest of the morning was a blur of paperwork and rules. Matteo's assistant, a stern woman named Mrs. Chen, explained everything. Where they could go in the house, where they couldn't, who they could talk to, who they couldn't. "Mr. Vitale's business requires absolute privacy," Mrs. Chen said. "You will never discuss what you see or hear with anyone outside this house." Sera nodded, even though she still didn't understand exactly what Matteo's business was. Elena stayed glued to Sera's side through it all. When Mrs. Chen showed them Elena's playroom, filled with expensive toys that looked like they'd never been touched, Elena just stood in the doorway. "Don't you want to play?" Sera asked. Elena shook her head. "Too quiet." Sera understood. After living with noise and chaos, the perfect silence of the mansion felt wrong. "Want to see my room?" Elena whispered. Elena's bedroom was like something from a fairy tale. Pink walls, a canopy bed, and more stuffed animals than any child could ever need. But it felt cold, like a display in a store window. Elena sat on her bed and picked up a framed photo. It showed a beautiful woman with dark hair and Elena's eyes. "Mama," Elena said softly. "She was very pretty," Sera said. "You look just like her." "She died in a car," Elena said. "Like your mama and papa." Sera's throat tightened. "That must have been very scary." Elena nodded. "Papa was sad. Really, really sad. Then he got angry all the time." Sera was starting to understand. Matteo had lost his wife and didn't know how to cope with his grief while raising a traumatized little girl, so he'd built walls around both of them, thinking that control meant safety. "He loves you," Sera said. "Sometimes grown-ups don't know how to show love when they're scared." "Are you scared?" Elena asked. "Sometimes, but I won't let anything happen to you." That afternoon, Elena showed Sera and Tommy the gardens behind the house. It was like a secret world with fountains and flower beds and hidden walkways. For the first time since Sera had found her, Elena smiled. Tommy's breathing was better after the doctor's visit that morning. Real medicine from a real doctor, something Sera had thought impossible just a day ago. "Look," Tommy called, pointing at a butterfly that had landed on his hand. Elena giggled, the sound like music in the quiet garden. They spent hours exploring, Elena chattering about every flower and statue. She was just a normal little girl when she wasn't scared. That evening, Matteo found them in the kitchen. Sera was making soup while Elena and Tommy drew pictures at the table. You don't have to cook, he said. We have staff for that. I like cooking, Sera replied. Besides, Elena helped. Elena held up her drawing proudly. I made flowers. Matteo looked at the picture like it was the most precious thing in the world. It's beautiful. You can have it, Elena said shyly. Matteo took the drawing with careful hands. Thank you. It was a small moment, but Sera saw hope in it. Later, after Elena and Tommy were asleep, Sera found Matteo in his study. The room was dark except for one lamp. He sat behind a massive desk, staring at Elena's drawing. She drew you a flower once before, he said without looking up. Right after Maria died, I wasn't handling things well. I yelled at her for getting crayon marks on my papers. Sera said nothing, just listened. She never drew me another picture. Until today. She forgives you, Sera said softly. Children shouldn't have to forgive their parents for being human. Maybe not, but they do, because they love us anyway. Matteo finally looked at her. In the lamplight, he looked younger, more vulnerable. How do you know so much about children? You said you raised Tommy, but you were just a kid yourself. Sera sat down in the chair across from his desk. When you're responsible for someone else's life, you grow up fast. I made lots of mistakes with Tommy, still do. But he adores you. Because I never gave up on him. That's all Elena needs from you, to know you won't give up. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Matteo opened a desk drawer and pulled out another framed photo. This one showed him, his wife, and baby Elena. They all looked so happy. Maria was the strong one, he said. She knew how to handle everything. I was just there. You were her husband, Elena's father. That's not just anything. After Maria died, I thought if I could control everything else, I could keep Elena safe. But I was really just pushing her away. It's not too late. Matteo looked at her with something that might have been hope. You really think so? Before Sera could answer, alarms started blaring throughout the house. Matteo was on his feet instantly, all softness gone from his face. Stay here, he ordered. But Sera was already running toward Elena and Tommy's room. She could hear shouts from outside, car engines roaring, and what sounded like breaking glass. Elena was sitting up in bed, crying. Tommy was awake too, his eyes wide with fear. It's okay, Sera said, pulling them both close. I'm here. The lights went out. Emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie red glow. Sera could hear Matteo's voice in the hallway, giving sharp orders. Elena was shaking. They're coming for me again. No, Sera said firmly. I won't let them. She gathered the children and moved them to the bathroom, the most secure room with no windows. They huddled together on the floor while chaos erupted around them. The attack lasted 20 minutes, but felt like hours. When it finally stopped, Sera heard Matteo calling their names. We're here, she called back. He appeared in the bathroom doorway, his suit torn and his face grim. When he saw them safe, relief flooded his features. Everyone okay? Sera checked Elena and Tommy. We're fine. Matteo knelt down next to Elena. For once, she didn't pull away. I'm sorry you were scared, he said gently. Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached out and touched the cut on his cheek. You're hurt, she whispered. Just a scratch. Elena leaned forward and hugged him. Matteo's arms came around her slowly, like he was afraid she might disappear. I love you, Papa, Elena said into his shoulder. Matteo closed his eyes, and Sera saw tears he was trying to hide. I love you too, little star, he whispered back. More than anything in this world. Later, after Elena and Tommy were finally asleep again, Sera and Matteo sat in the kitchen. The house was quiet except for the footsteps of guards patrolling outside. "This is what our life looks like," Matteo said. "Attacks, danger, fear. Are you sure you want this for Tommy?" Sera looked out the window at the gardens where Elena had laughed that afternoon. "Tommy's been afraid every day for 3 years," she said. "Afraid of being hungry, cold, sick. Afraid I couldn't take care of him. At least here, he's afraid but fed, afraid but warm, afraid but loved. And you? What are you afraid of?" Sera thought about it. "Failing them, Elena and Tommy. They need me to be strong." "You're the strongest person I've ever met." "I don't feel strong." "Strength isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right even when you are scared." Sera looked at him. Really looked at him. Underneath the expensive clothes and cold control, she saw a man who loved his daughter desperately, but didn't know how to show it. A man who'd lost everything once and was terrified of losing what he had left. "We're going to figure this out," she said. "All of us together." Matteo nodded. Together. As Sera headed back to her room, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. 3 weeks passed in a strange new rhythm. Sera woke each morning in the softest bed she'd ever slept in, with Elena curled up beside her and Tommy breathing easily in his own bed nearby. The medicine was working, and color had returned to his cheeks. Elena was changing too. She laughed more often and had started calling Matteo Papa instead of hiding when he entered a room. But she still wouldn't sleep alone in her own room, preferring to stay close to Sera. Sera was learning the rules of this strange new world. Which guards were kind and which ones watched her with suspicious eyes. Which parts of the house were off limits. How Matteo's voice changed when he was talking business on the phone, cold and dangerous in a way that made her stomach clench. She was also learning about Matteo himself, how he drank his coffee black every morning while reading reports that made his jaw tight, how he always checked on Elena before he left for work, even though he tried to pretend it was casual, how he sometimes stood in the hallway outside their room at night like he wanted to come in but didn't know if he was welcome. This morning was different. Sera could feel tension in the air like electricity before a storm. The guards were talking in hushed voices, and Matteo had been on the phone since before dawn. Elena felt it too. She stayed close to Sera, playing quietly instead of running around the garden like usual. "What's wrong with Papa?" she whispered while they colored pictures at the kitchen table. "He's worried about keeping us safe," Sera said, which was true, but not the whole truth. Tommy looked up from his drawing. "Are the bad people coming back?" Before Sera could answer, Rocco appeared in the doorway. Matteo's right-hand man was tall and muscled, with scars on his knuckles that told stories Sera didn't want to hear. He'd been watching her since day one, making it clear he didn't trust her. "Boss wants to see you," he told Sera. "Alone." Elena grabbed Sera's hand. "I want to come too." "Stay here with Tommy," Sera said gently. "I'll be right back." Sera followed Rocco through the house to Matteo's office. The room felt different today, darker somehow, even with sunlight streaming through the windows. Matteo stood behind his desk, his face harder than she'd ever seen it. On the desk lay photographs that made Sera's blood run cold. Pictures of her, of Tommy, of Elena playing in the garden. Someone had been watching them, following their every move. "Bianca Russo," Matteo said, his voice like winter. "She's escalating." Sera picked up one of the photos. It showed her and the children at the playground yesterday, Elena on the swings with Tommy pushing her. They'd looked so happy and normal. Now the image felt twisted, dangerous. Who is she? The head of a rival family. She blames me for her brother's death. Did you kill him? Matteo's eyes met hers. Yes. The simple honesty of it hit her like a slap. Sera knew Matteo was dangerous. She'd heard him give orders that made her skin crawl, but hearing him admit to murder so calmly made it real. Why? He tried to hurt Elena, so I eliminated the threat. Sera looked at the photos again. Someone out there wanted to hurt Elena to get back at Matteo. And now that person knew about her and Tommy, too. What does she want? Everything I love destroyed. My business, my family, my life. And Tommy and me? We're just collateral damage? Matteo's face softened slightly. You're not collateral damage. You're... He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. You're important to Elena. That makes you important to me. Sera felt something flutter in her chest at his words, but she pushed it down. This wasn't the time for confusing feelings. What do we do? You don't do anything. Rocco is doubling security. No one leaves the house without my permission. No exceptions. Sera's spine stiffened. You can't lock us up like prisoners. I can and I will if it keeps you safe. Elena needs fresh air, exercise, normal experiences. Tommy, too. They need to be alive more than they need to be normal. Before Sera could argue, one of the guards burst into the office. Boss, he panted, we intercepted a message. They're planning something for today. Matteo was moving before the man finished speaking. Lock down everything. No one in or out. Where's Elena? Kitchen with Tommy, Sera said. Get them to the safe room. Now. The safe room was hidden behind a bookshelf in Matteo's office. Inside, it looked like a small apartment with beds, food, and communication equipment. Elena took one look at the windowless space and started crying. I don't want to hide, she sobbed. I want to go outside. Just for a little while, baby, Sera said, holding her close. Tommy was trying to be brave, but Sera could see fear in his eyes. This wasn't the kind of life she wanted for him. They waited in the safe room for hours. Sera could hear voices outside, footsteps and what sounded like vehicles coming and going. Elena fell asleep eventually, exhausted from crying. Tommy read a book, but his hand shook as he turned the pages. When Matteo finally came to get them, his face was grim. It's over for now, he said, but they got closer than ever before. How close? Sera asked. They made it to the garden before we stopped them. Sera's blood chilled. The garden where Elena played every day, where Tommy chased butterflies and laughed like a normal child. That night, after the children were finally asleep, Sera found herself wide awake. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow looked threatening. She got up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden that no longer felt safe. Strong arms appeared around her from behind, and she tensed before realizing it was Matteo. Can't sleep either? He asked softly. I keep thinking about those pictures. Someone was watching us, and we had no idea. I should have protected you better. You can't control everything. I have to try. Sera turned in his arms to face him. In the moonlight, he looked exhausted and haunted. This isn't living, she said quietly. Hiding in safe rooms surrounded by guards. Elena is 7 years old. She should be playing with friends, going to birthday parties, learning to ride a bike. She should also stay alive to see 8. There has to be another way. Matteo's hands came up to cup her face. I've been in this life for 15 years. There is no other way. Only varying degrees of survival. Then maybe it's time to get out. You don't get out. Not once you're in this deep. People change careers all the time. Not people like me. Sera saw the pain in his eyes, the weight of choices he couldn't undo. But she also saw something else. a longing for something different, something better. "Elena loves you," she said, "more than she fears this life. But someday she'll be old enough to understand what you do. What will you tell her then?" "That everything I did was to protect her. Will that be enough?" Matteo was quiet for a long moment. Then he kissed her forehead and stepped back. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start over." But the next day brought new problems. Elena woke up from nightmares, crying for her mother. Tommy had an asthma attack from the stress. And Sera felt like she was drowning in the weight of keeping everyone together. Matteo found her crying in the laundry room, surrounded by tiny clothes that needed washing. "Hey," he said softly, sitting beside her on the floor. "Talk to me." "I don't know if I can do this," Sera admitted. "Elena needs more than I can give her. She needs her father, but you're always working or worried or dealing with some new threat. Tommy needs stability, but we're living in a war zone, and What do you need?" The question caught her off guard. When was the last time anyone had asked what she needed? "I need to know this is worth it," she said honestly. "That we're not just surviving, but actually building something good." Matteo reached for her hand. "Elena has spoken more in the past month than in the 6 months before you came. Tommy is healthy for the first time in years. And you've given me hope that maybe I can be a better father than I thought. But this life comes with costs, and sometimes those costs are too high." Before Sera could ask what he meant, alarms started blaring again. This time was different. Instead of distant gunshots, they heard breaking glass much closer. The sound of footsteps in the house itself. "They're inside," Matteo said, his voice deadly calm. He pulled Sera to her feet and pushed her toward the door. "Get Elena and Tommy. Go to the safe room. Don't come out until I get you." "What about you?" "I'll handle this." Sera ran through the house, her heart pounding. She could hear shouting and the sound of fighting somewhere nearby. Elena and Tommy were in the playroom, huddled together under a table. "Come on," Sera said, trying to keep her voice calm. "We need to go." Elena was crying again, but she didn't resist when Sera picked her up. Tommy held tight to Sera's other hand as they moved through the halls. They were almost to the office when a man appeared at the end of the hallway. He wore a black mask and carried a gun that looked huge in his hands. Sera's blood turned to ice. They were trapped. The man raised his weapon, and Sera pushed the children behind her. If someone was going to get hurt, it would be her, not them. "Please," she said, "they're just kids." The man said something in a language she didn't understand. His finger moved to the trigger. That's when Matteo appeared behind him like a shadow. The fight was brutal and quick. When it was over, the intruder wasn't moving, and Matteo had blood on his hands. Elena was sobbing. Tommy looked like he might throw up, and Sera felt something break inside her chest. This was their life now. Violence and fear and children crying over dead bodies in fancy hallways. "It's over," Matteo said, reaching for Elena. But Elena pulled away from him, pressing closer to Sera. "You killed him," she whispered, "to protect you." "But you killed him." Matteo's face went pale. "Elena, I don't want you to kill people, Papa. I want you to stop." The words hung in the air like a judgment. Sera could see them hit Matteo like physical blows. "Sometimes we have to do bad things to protect the people we love," he said quietly. Elena shook her head. "Mama wouldn't want you to kill people." Matteo closed his eyes in pain. When he opened them again, they were full of something that looked like surrender. "You're right," he said. "She wouldn't." Later, after the house was secured and the children were finally calm, Sera found Matteo standing in his wife's old garden. Maria had planted roses here, and somehow they still bloomed despite everything. Elena's right, he said without turning around. Maria would hate what I've become. You became what you had to become to survive. Did I? Or did I choose the easy way instead of the hard one? What's the hard way? Matteo turned to face her. In the moonlight, he looked younger and older at the same time. Walking away, finding a different way to live, giving Elena the father she deserves instead of the one I am. Is that what you want? What I want doesn't matter. Only what's best for Elena. And Tommy. And Tommy. And me? Matteo stepped closer. You know what I want for you? Sera's heart started beating faster. What? Everything. Safety, happiness, a life without fear, the chance to be young instead of always taking care of everyone else. I don't know how to be anything else. Maybe we could learn together. Before Sera could respond, Matteo kissed her. It was soft and desperate and full of longing for things that felt impossible. When they broke apart, Sera felt dizzy. This is crazy, she whispered. Probably. I don't know anything about your world. I don't know anything about normal life. We could hurt each other. We could save each other. Sera looked up at him, this dangerous man who read bedtime stories to his daughter and made sure Tommy had the best doctors. This criminal who killed to protect and kissed like he was afraid she'd disappear. What happens now? She asked. Now we figure out how to build something better for all of us. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, Sera allowed herself to hope that maybe, somehow, they could create a life worth living, even if it meant leaving everything else behind. The morning after the attack, Sera woke to find Elena's bed empty. Panic shot through her until she heard voices in the hallway. She found Elena sitting on the floor outside Matteo's office, drawing with crayons while he worked inside with the door open. "Good morning," Elena said brightly, like nothing had happened the night before. But Sera could see the tension in the little girl's shoulders, the way she kept glancing toward the office to make sure her father was still there. "What are you drawing?" Sera asked, sitting down beside her. "A new house," Elena said, "with a big yard and no gates, and flowers like Mama used to grow." The picture showed a small house with a garden full of colorful blooms. Stick figures that looked like Elena, Sera, Tommy, and Matteo stood in front, all holding hands. "It's beautiful," Sera said, her throat tight. From inside the office, she could hear Matteo on the phone. His voice was different than usual, not cold and commanding, but tired, almost defeated. "I need to speak with Carmine," he was saying. "Tell him it's urgent." Elena looked up at Sera with worried eyes. "Papa's sad. He's trying to figure out how to keep us safe. I told him I don't want him to hurt people anymore." "That was very brave of you. Do you think he'll listen?" Before Sera could answer, Tommy appeared around the corner, still in his pajamas. His breathing was clear and easy now, but his face showed the strain of yesterday's fear. "Can we go outside today?" he asked quietly. Sera's heart ached. "I don't know, sweetheart. We need to wait and see." "I miss the garden," Elena said. "The butterflies were supposed to come back this week." Matteo's voice carried from the office. "I don't care about the cost. I need guarantees, complete protection for my family." The word family made something warm spread through Sera's chest, even as worry gnawed at her stomach. An hour later, Matteo called them into his office. He looked like he hadn't slept, but his eyes were clearer than Sera had seen them in days. "I've been thinking about what you said," he told Elena. "About not wanting me to hurt people." Elena nodded solemnly. "Mama always said hurting people makes everyone sadder." "Your mama was a very smart woman." Matteo knelt down to Elena's level. What if I told you there might be a way for us to live somewhere else? Somewhere safer? Elena's eyes went wide. Like in my picture? Maybe not exactly like your picture, but different. Better. Sera felt her heart start to race. What are you talking about? Matteo stood up, his face serious. I've been in contact with some people. There are ways to step back, to leave this life behind. But it would mean giving up everything. This house, the security, all of it. Where would we go? Far away, new identities, new names. We'd have to start completely over. Sera stared at him. You'd do that? Give up your entire life? What life? Matteo asked. Hiding behind walls, looking over our shoulders every day? Watching Elena grow up afraid? He shook his head. That's not living. That's just surviving. Tommy tugged on Sera's hand. Does that mean no more bad men with guns? It means we'd try very hard to make sure you never have to see that again, Matteo said gently. But Sera could see the doubt in his eyes. What's the catch? Matteo was quiet for a moment. Leaving this life isn't simple. There are debts that have to be paid, arrangements that have to be made, and no guarantees it'll work. How long? A few weeks, maybe a month? And until then? Until then, we stay here. We stay safe. And we hope. That afternoon, while Elena and Tommy napped, Sera found herself alone with Matteo for the first time since their kiss. They sat in the garden, surrounded by roses that somehow still bloomed despite the chaos around them. Are you serious about leaving? She asked. Dead serious. But your business, your responsibilities. I have people who can take over. It won't be easy, but it's possible. Sera watched a butterfly land on a nearby flower. What made you change your mind? Matteo was quiet for a long time. Elena's words last night. The way she looked at me after. He shook his head. I saw myself through her eyes. I saw what I'd become. You're not a monster. Aren't I? I've killed people, Sera. A lot of people. To protect your family. That's what I told myself. But somewhere along the way, I think I forgot that there were other options. I got so caught up in being powerful, in controlling everything, that I lost sight of what actually mattered. Which is being the kind of father Elena can be proud of, the kind of man Maria fell in love with. Sera reached for his hand. You can still be that man. Can I? After everything I've done? Elena forgives you. That has to count for something. What about you? Can you forgive me? Sera looked at him. Really looked. She saw the exhaustion, the guilt, the desperate hope for redemption. But she also saw the man who read bedtime stories, who made sure Tommy got the best medical care, who was willing to give up everything for a chance at a better life. I think, she said carefully, that people can change if they really want to, if they have something worth changing for. Do I? Instead of answering with words, Sera leaned over and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of possibility. When they broke apart, Matteo rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he whispered. I know it's crazy and too soon and probably the worst timing in the world, but I love you. Sera's heart stopped, then started again, beating faster than before. I love you too, she whispered back, which is probably just as crazy. We're quite a pair. The homeless woman and the Mafia boss. Sounds like a bad movie. Or the beginning of a great love story. The next few days passed in a strange bubble of hope mixed with fear. Matteo spent hours on the phone, making arrangements that sounded complicated and dangerous. Sera tried to keep Elena and Tommy distracted while adults planned their future around them. Elena sensed the change in atmosphere. She asked fewer questions, but watched everything with those wise 7-year-old eyes. Tommy was more clingy than usual, afraid to let Sera out of his sight for too long. "Are we going to be okay?" Elena asked one night as Sera tucked her into bed. "I think so, sweetheart. Your papa is working very hard to make sure we are." "Will the new house have a garden?" "I hope so." "Will papa still be papa if we have new names?" The question broke Sera's heart. "He'll always be your papa, no matter what name he uses." "And you'll still be Sera?" "I'll still be me. The names don't matter as much as the people." Elena seemed satisfied with that answer. She fell asleep holding Sera's hand, peaceful for the first time in days. But that peace was shattered 3 days later. Sera woke to the sound of breaking glass and shouting, but this time it wasn't an attack from outside. This time the danger came from within. "Boss!" she heard Rocco yelling. "We've got a problem." Sera grabbed Elena and Tommy, pulling them into the bathroom like she'd been trained. But instead of hiding, she cracked the door to listen. "What kind of problem?" Matteo's voice, sharp and deadly. "Someone talked. Bianca knows about your plans to leave." Sera's blood turned to ice. "How?" "We're not sure, but she's moving fast. Word is she's got people on the way here now." "How many people?" "Too many." Sera heard footsteps running past the bathroom, doors slamming, the sound of weapons being prepared. Elena was crying silently, her face pressed against Sera's shoulder. Tommy held on to both of them, his body shaking. "Listen to me," Sera whispered urgently. "We might have to run very fast. Can you both do that?" They nodded. Sera opened the bathroom door carefully. The hallway was empty, but she could hear chaos from downstairs. Shouting, the sound of furniture being moved, preparations for a fight. She led the children toward Matteo's office, where she hoped they'd be safer. But they didn't make it. Rocco appeared at the top of the stairs, his face grim. "Sera, get them to the safe room, now!" "Where's Matteo?" "Dealing with the situation. Go." But before they could move, the front door exploded inward. Armed figures poured into the house like a dark flood. "Too late," Rocco muttered, pulling out his gun. "Stay behind me." The gunfight that followed was like nothing Sera had experienced before. Not the quick, brutal encounters they'd survived previously, but a prolonged battle that seemed to rage through every room of the house. Sera pulled Elena and Tommy into a bedroom, barricading the door with furniture. Through the walls, she could hear Matteo's voice giving orders, the sound of running feet and weapons firing. "I want to go home," Elena sobbed. "We are home," Sera said, though the words felt hollow. "No," Elena said. "I want to go to the house in my picture, the one with no guns." Tommy looked up at Sera with terrified eyes. "Are we going to die?" Before Sera could answer, the bedroom door splintered open. A woman stepped through, elegant and beautiful despite the chaos around her. She wore expensive clothes and held a gun like she knew how to use it. This had to be Bianca Russo. "So," Bianca said, her voice cultured and cold, "you're the woman who thinks she can steal my revenge." Sera pushed Elena and Tommy behind her. "We're just children and a caretaker. We're not part of this." "Oh, but you are." Bianca smiled, and it was terrifying. "You're the new weakness in Matteo's armor, his soft spot, his reason to run away instead of facing what he's done." "What do you want?" "Justice. My brother is dead because of Matteo Vitale, so now Matteo gets to know what it feels like to lose everything he loves." Bianca raised her weapon, pointing it directly at Elena. That's when the door behind her exploded inward, and Matteo appeared like an avenging angel. The fight between them was fast and vicious. Bianca was skilled, but Matteo fought with the desperation of a man protecting his family. When it was over, Bianca lay still on the floor. and Matteo was bleeding from a wound in his shoulder. Elena ran to him, not caring about the blood. "Papa." "I'm okay, little star," he said, hugging her close. "Everything's okay now." But Sera could see it wasn't okay. The house was destroyed. Several of Matteo's men were wounded or worse, and their chance of leaving quietly had died with Bianca Russo. That night, as they sat in the one intact room left in the house, Matteo made a phone call that changed everything. "It's done," he said into the phone. "Yes, tonight. All of us." He hung up and looked at Sera. "We have to go, right now." "Where?" "Away, far away. The arrangements I was making, they're happening now, ready or not." Within an hour, they were in a car driving through the dark streets. Elena slept between Sera and Tommy, exhausted from fear. Matteo sat up front, his shoulder bandaged, but his face determined. "Where are we going?" Sera asked quietly. "Oregon, small town, normal life, new names, new everything." "What will you do for work?" Matteo smiled, and for the first time in weeks it reached his eyes. "I have a degree in business administration from before all this. Maybe I'll open a hardware store, something simple." "You? A hardware store?" "Elena wants a garden. Hardware stores sell gardening supplies." Sera felt something she'd almost forgotten how to feel, excitement about the future. "What will our new names be?" "Whatever we want them to be." 3 months later, Sera stood in the backyard of a small blue house, watching Elena and Tommy chase butterflies through a garden that was finally starting to bloom. The roses weren't as perfect as the ones at the mansion, but they were theirs. Tommy's laughter filled the air as he caught a butterfly on his finger. His breathing was clear and strong, and his cheeks were pink with health and happiness. Elena knelt in the dirt, planting seeds with the concentration of a master gardener. She talked to each plant as she worked, telling them about her day at the new school, her new friends, the normal life that was becoming more real every day. "The tomatoes are going to be huge this year," Matteo said, coming up behind Sera and wrapping his arms around her waist. "How do you know? You've never grown tomatoes in your life." "I've been reading books, lots of books." Sera leaned back against his chest. Michael Romano, suburban gardener. Who would have thought? Michael Romano was his new name, just like she was now Sera Romano. They'd gotten married in a simple ceremony at the local courthouse, with Elena and Tommy as their only witnesses. No fancy dress or expensive flowers, just vows spoken with love and hope for the future. "Any regrets?" Matteo asked quietly. Sera looked around at their small yard, their modest house, their beautifully ordinary life. "Only one," she said. "What?" "That it. Took us so long to get here." Elena ran over, her hands dirty and her face bright with joy. "Mama! Papa! Look what I found!" She held up a caterpillar, examining it with scientific curiosity. "It's going to be a butterfly," she announced. "We should make it a special place to change." "That's a wonderful idea," Sera said, kneeling down to Elena's level. "Everything changes," Elena said seriously. "That's what Mrs. Patterson said at school. Even scary things can become beautiful." Sera met Matteo's eyes over Elena's head. In them, she saw everything they'd given up and everything they'd gained. The fear was gone, replaced by something infinitely more valuable. Peace, safety, love, a real family built from broken pieces. As the sun set over their little garden, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Sera knew they'd finally found what they'd been searching for all along. Home. Not a place protected by walls and guards, but a feeling created by people who chose to love each other every single day. "Race you to the house," Tommy called, already running. Elena dropped her caterpillar gently on a leaf and chased after him, her laughter echoing in the evening air. Sera and Matteo followed slowly, hand in hand, in no hurry to end this perfect, ordinary moment. Behind them, the garden rustled in the gentle breeze, and somewhere among the flowers, a butterfly landed on the roses Elena had planted with such hope. Everything had changed, and finally, beautifully, everything was exactly as it should be.